The first shell hit the cathedral during Governor Whitmore's address, his voice still crackling through the Vox speakers about renewal and imperial gratitude, when the entire eastern transept became a column of fire and screaming marble. I was 3 blocks away, standing guard outside the Administratum Annex, watching fireworks paint the sky in gold and crimson, and for one stupid second I thought the explosion was part of the celebration. Private Darren Vance, 73rd Cascadian Rifles, 22 years old, and about to learn what Ork ordnance sounds like when it kisses a crowd of 40,000 pilgrims. The second shell told me everything I needed to know. It punched through the processional boulevard where families had gathered to watch the midnight procession, and the sound it made was nothing like our artillery. Our guns bark, Ork guns laugh. That bass-heavy thwoom that rattled my teeth and made my ears feel like someone had shoved ice picks through them carried a quality I can only describe as gleeful, like the weapon itself was having a wonderful time. Sergeant Hutchins grabbed my collar and hauled me toward the annex doors before I finished processing what I was seeing. Green streaks arcing across the stars, not fireworks, rocket trails, dozens of them, crisscrossing the sky like some lunatic's finger painting, and behind them came the sound that still wakes me up most nights. Waaagh. Not a word, not really. More like a physical force, a wall of noise that compressed the air in my chest and made my vision swim. 40,000 voices raised in joyous anticipation of violence, and somewhere in that mass of roaring throats, something huge was laughing. I heard it clearly even through the chaos, a sound like boulders grinding together, rhythmic and delighted. The annex doors slammed shut behind us. Hutchins was already screaming into his Vox bead, trying to raise command, trying to get orders, trying to make sense of the situation. I stood there with my Lazaraful clutched against my chest like a child's comfort blanket and watched the windows strobe with detonations. The glass held for now, armored. This was an administratum building after all. Important people worked here. Important papers lived in these halls. None of that would matter if those green bastards reached us. Vance, get your head right. Hutchins had a face like eroded granite, all sharp angles and weather-beaten skin. 8 years fighting across 4 different war zones, and I had never seen him look scared before. He looked scared now. We need to reach the motor pool. Chimera extraction. Command says the whole Eastern District is compromised. How? The word fell out of my mouth before I could stop it. The orbital monitors, the defense grid, how did they get this close without warning? Hutchins didn't answer. He grabbed my arm and dragged me toward the service stairs. The building shook. Somewhere above us glass was shattering, and I could hear secondary explosions rippling through the upper floors. Someone had decorated the annex for the celebration. I remember seeing paper streamers drifting down through the emergency lighting, gold and silver, settling on the floor like dying leaves. They looked obscene against the backdrop of destruction. We made it down 2 flights before the first Ork came through the wall. I do not mean he broke through a door or shattered a window. I mean he simply shoulder-charged the reinforced rockcrete like it personally offended him and exploded into the stairwell in a spray of debris and howling joy. 8 feet of green muscle and crude metal armor, one eye replaced by a glowing red augmetic that clicked and whirred as it focused on us, and a grin so wide I could count every single one of his jagged yellow teeth. Humies! His voice was pure delight. Good year, good fight. Hutchins fired first. Last bolts splashed against the creature's chestplate, scoring black marks but failing to penetrate. I fired. Next, aiming for the face, and actually managed to put a shot through his cheek. The Ork didn't seem to notice. He was too busy laughing. He crossed the distance between us in 2 strides. His arm came up, holding something that might once have been an industrial cutting tool but had been modified into a weapon through the simple expedient of adding more blades and painting it red. The swing missed me by inches only because Hutchins shoved me aside. Hutchins didn't miss. I watched the blade take my sergeant across the midsection, watched him fold around it, his face locked in an expression of profound surprise. watched the orc lift him off his feet and shake him like a terrier with a rat, spraying blood across the walls, across my face, across those golden streamers still drifting down from above. Good one. The orc threw Hutchins aside. His body hit the wall with a wet crunch. You next, little git. Make it fun. I ran. Emperor, forgive me. I ran. I dropped my rifle and I ran, scrambling down the stairs on all fours, bouncing off walls, tumbling through a fire door and into the basement corridor beyond. Behind me I could hear him coming, not chasing, walking, taking his time, enjoying the hunt. Run, run, run. His voice echoed through the concrete passages. The faster you run, the more fun when I catch ya. The motor pool. Hutchins had said motor pool. I had no idea where I was going, no map, no plan, just animal terror propelling me through identical grey corridors while the footsteps behind me grew steadily closer. The building's foundations trembled with each impact from above. I could hear more voices now, more orc voices, filtering down through the structure like water seeping through cracks in a dam. They were everywhere. They had come out of nowhere, and now they were everywhere. I found a maintenance closet and threw myself inside, pulled the door shut, pressed myself into the corner behind a rack of cleaning supplies and tried to control my breathing. The footsteps stopped outside. I smell ya, Hughie. His voice was sing-song, playful. I smell your fear. Tastes good. I closed my eyes. I thought about home. I thought about my mother, about the last letter I had sent her, full of lies about how safe garrison duty was. I thought about Emily, the girl from the Agra commune who had promised to wait for me. I thought about all the things I would never do, never see, never become. The footsteps moved on. I stayed in that closet for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. The sounds of combat filtered through the walls, distant las fire and the heavier reports of orc sluggers, screams and laughter, and that constant background roar of Waaagh that seemed to pulse through the very foundations of the building. At some point, the lights went out. Emergency lumens flickered on, painting everything in harsh red. When I finally crept out, the corridor was empty. Blood on the walls, a severed hand wearing a signet ring that marked its owner as a senior administratum clerk, the smell of smoke and something else, something organic and wrong, a scent I would later learn to associate with orc fungal growth, but which at that moment just registered as alien and terrible. I found my rifle somehow. It was sitting in the middle of the corridor, surrounded by debris, and I grabbed it with trembling hands and checked the power pack. Half charged, enough for maybe 20 shots. I had no spare packs, no supplies, no idea where I was or how to get out. What I did have was a growing certainty that something was deeply wrong with this attack. The thought crystallized as I picked my way through the basement level, following emergency signage toward what I hoped was an exit. Orcs were not subtle. Everyone knew that. They came in screaming, guns blazing, announcing their presence with the enthusiasm of children at a festival. They did not sneak through orbital defenses. They did not drop out of nowhere onto heavily fortified worlds with no warning. Someone had let them in. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Someone had turned off the monitors, disabled the early warning systems, created a gap in our defenses large enough to let a full Waaagh through. This was not just an attack. This was a betrayal. I found the motor pool 20 minutes later. The doors had been blown off their hinges and the vehicles inside had been reduced to burning wreckage. Chimeras torn apart, their fuel cells ruptured and blazing, sentinels toppled like broken toys. In the center of the carnage stood a vehicle unlike anything I had ever seen, a massive orc contraption that seemed to be made entirely of mismatched parts welded together by someone with no understanding of engineering but absolute confidence in their vision. It was painted red and covered in grinning skull motifs, and it was currently being loaded with what I can only describe as loot. 3 orcs were hauling supplies into the vehicle, weapons, ammunition, crates of rations, anything they could grab. They worked with surprising efficiency, their movements coordinated despite their apparent chaos. One of them had strapped a string of severed human fingers around his neck like a trophy necklace. Another was wearing what had clearly been Governor Whitmore's ceremonial sash, now stained with blood and ash. I crouched behind a burning salamander and watched them work. The heat was intense, smoke stinging my eyes, but I did not dare move. One wrong sound and they would spot me. One moment of bad luck and I would join the collection of trophies. Oi! One of the orcs, the largest of the three, suddenly straightened up. You feel dat? Feel what? The ground, it's shaken more. They all went silent, listening, and yes, I could feel it too. A rhythmic tremor, deep and regular, like a heartbeat transmitted through stone. Something was coming, something big. The boss, the orc with the finger necklace, started laughing, a sound like rocks in a tumble dryer. Da. Boss eyes comin'. Told you he'd want to see the Humi city burn. They abandoned their looting and ran toward the exit, whooping and hollering with excitement. I stayed hidden, heart hammering, trying to process what I had heard. The boss. Orc hierarchy was simple, brutal, direct. The biggest and meanest rose to the top. If these foot soldiers were this excited about their leader's arrival, then whatever was coming had to be enormous. The tremors intensified. I had to move. Staying here was death. The motor pool was compromised, but there had to be other ways out. Service tunnels, maintenance access, emergency evacuation routes. Every Imperial facility had redundancies. I just had to find them. I found a service hatch in the far corner of the motor pool, hidden behind a collapsed section of wall. It was partially blocked by debris, but I managed to squeeze through, scraping skin and tearing fabric, but making it into the narrow tunnel beyond. Emergency lumens lined the ceiling every few meters, casting weak pools of light that barely pushed back the darkness. The air was stale, heavy with dust and the distant rumor of smoke. The tunnel stretched in both directions. I picked a direction at random and started walking. Time became strange in that passage. Minutes stretched, sounds echoed in ways that made distance impossible to judge. I heard distant screaming that could have been blocks away or right around the next corner. I heard less fire, sporadic and desperate. I heard orc voices raised in that constant, joyful chant, and beneath it all that rhythmic trembling that grew steadily stronger. I came to a junction where the tunnel split into three paths. A body lay slumped against the wall, a woman in the robes of an administratum scribe, her eyes still open and fixed on something I could not see. Her data slate was clutched in her dead fingers, its screen still glowing faintly. I pried it from her grip, ignoring the way her flesh had already begun to stiffen, and looked at what she had been reading. The screen showed a logistics manifest. Troop deployments for the celebration, defense force positions, patrol routes, sensor grid schedules, everything an invading force would need to know to slip through undetected. And at the bottom, a sender's address. Administrator Prefect Wallace Monroe. I knew that name. Everyone in the 73rd knew that name. Monroe was the bastard who had cut our supply budget last quarter, who had reassigned half our heavy weapons teams to ceremonial duty for the celebration, who had been making speeches all week about how the governor's new trade agreements would bring prosperity to Cascadia Prime. Monroe had sold us out. The data slate slipped from my fingers. I stood there in that narrow tunnel, staring at nothing, trying to understand how any human being could do this, could betray millions of people to the greenskins, could watch children being torn apart and cities burning and call it acceptable loss. Then the ceiling collapsed. Not an explosion, not enemy action, just structural failure, the accumulated damage finally exceeding what the ancient rockcrete could bear. I threw myself backward as tons of debris came crashing down, blocking the tunnel behind me, filling the air with choking dust that burned my lungs and blinded me. When I could see again, one of my paths was gone. I took another. The tunnel eventually led upward, emerging through a maintenance hatch into what had been a Hablock's communal prayer chamber. The space was circular, ringed with statue alcoves depicting various imperial saints, their beatific faces now streaked with soot and blood. Bodies littered the floor, civilians who had gathered here seeking sanctuary, seeking the Emperor's protection. The Emperor had not answered. Through the shattered windows I could see the city burning. Cascadia Prime's capital had been a beautiful place, or so I had been told. Gothic spires reaching toward the sky, processional boulevards lined with flowering trees, great cathedral complexes that had taken centuries to build. Now it was a hellscape of flame and destruction, smoke columns rising into a sky that pulsed with the reflected glow of 1,000 fires. The Ork ships hung overhead, crude orbital platforms bristling with weapons, disgorging a constant stream of landing craft and fighter bombers. And marching through the burning streets, illuminated by the destruction it was causing, was the largest living thing I had ever seen, an Ork warboss. But that term felt inadequate, like calling a tsunami a wave. He stood at least 15 feet tall, encased in armor that was part machinery and part crude metal sculpture, a walking fortress of guns and blades and pure concentrated violence. Each step shook the ground, each swing of his massive power claw demolished buildings, and he was laughing, that boulder grinding sound I had heard at the start of the attack, amplified now to the point where I could feel it in my bones. "Happy New Year, Humies!" His voice boomed across the city, amplified by voxcasters built into his armor. "De Boyz decided you needed a bigger party, so we's bringin' de biggest, de best, de most bombastic Waaagh dis sector's ever seen." The Orks around him cheered, thousands of them, a green tide flowing through the streets, shooting at anything that moved, setting fire to anything that would burn, treating the whole apocalypse like the greatest celebration in their brutal history. I watched from the prayer chamber window, hidden in shadows, and felt something cold settle into my stomach. Not fear. I was past fear. This was something else, certainty maybe, the certainty that I was going to die here, that nothing I did could change that my only choice was how. Then I saw the transport. It was Imperial, a Valkyrie assault carrier, flying low and fast between the burning towers. Its running lights were dark, engines straining, clearly trying to slip through the chaos undetected. As I watched, it banked hard to avoid a stream of Ork anti-aircraft fire and dove toward a landing pad 3 blocks away. 3 blocks, maybe 400 meters, through streets crawling with enemies, buildings collapsing, fires spreading. Impossible odds. I started running anyway. The prayer chamber had a side exit that led into an alley. I moved through shadows, staying low, using the smoke and chaos as cover. The heat was incredible, waves of it rolling off the burning buildings, making the air shimmer and dance. Ash fell like snow, coating everything in gray, muffling sounds in strange ways. Twice I had to hide as Ork patrols thundered past. They were not searching systematically, just roaming, looking for entertainment. One group had captured a civilian and was playing some kind of game with him, tossing him back and forth between them while he screamed. I kept moving. I could not help him. I could barely help myself. The landing pad was a rooftop platform, accessible via an external staircase that had somehow survived the destruction. I was halfway up when the Valkyrie touched down, its ramp already lowering before it had fully settled. Armed figures in stormtrooper gear poured out, forming a defensive perimeter, weapons up and scanning for threats. And behind them, escorted by 2 officers in pristine uniforms, was Prefect Wallace Monroe. I recognized him from the propaganda posters, a distinguished man in his 60s, silver hair swept back, aquiline features arranged in an expression of perpetual superiority. He was carrying a lockbox under one arm, expensive-looking, probably containing whatever payment he had received for his betrayal. The stormtroopers spotted me. Lasguns swung in my direction. I raised my hands, rifle still dangling from its strap, and shouted something about being a survivor, a soldier. "Please help me." Monroe looked at me with eyes that held no more warmth than a shark's. "Leave him," he said. "We have what we came for, the extraction. Window closes in 3 minutes." "Sir." One of the stormtroopers, his face hidden behind a helmet, stepped forward. "He is a guardsman. We should—" I said, "Leave him." Monroe was already walking toward the Valkyrie's ramp. "The greenskins will keep him occupied. We need to be airborne before that monster notices us." The stormtroopers hesitated. I could see it in their body language, the tension between orders and conscience. But they were trained to obey, conditioned to follow, and after a moment, they turned and followed their master into the transport. I ran. I threw myself up the remaining stairs 3 at a time, lungs burning, legs screaming, reaching the landing pad just as the Valkyrie's engines began to whine. The ramp was closing. I could see Monroe through the narrowing gap, settling into a seat, already looking away, already dismissing me from his thoughts. I got my fingers on the ramp's edge just before it sealed. The hydraulics were strong, designed to close securely even under fire. But I was desperate, running on adrenaline and rage, and I managed to jam my rifle into the gap before it could fully close. The mechanism ground against the obstruction, warning lights flashing, and inside the compartment someone was shouting. I squeezed through. The ramp finished closing behind me, trapping me inside with Monroe and his escort, 6 stormtroopers, 2 officers, and 1 traitor who had murdered my world. They stared at me, weapons halfway raised, unsure how to respond to this impossible intrusion. "Get him off my transport!" Monroe's voice cracked with something that might have been fear. "Shoot him, throw him out. Sir, we have lifted off. Opening the ramp now would—" "I do not care. Kill him." The stormtroopers looked at each other. One of them raised his weapon. I could see his finger tightening on the trigger, could see my death in the angle of that barrel. Then the Valkyrie lurched. Something hit us, hard. The transport spun sideways, throwing everyone off their feet, weapons discharging into the ceiling as fingers spasmed on triggers. Warning alarms screamed. The pilot's voice came over the internal vox, high and panicked, words tumbling over each other too fast to understand. Through the small viewport, I caught a glimpse of what had hit us. An Ork fighter bomber, its pilot cackling with glee as he pulled up for another pass, his aircraft trailing smoke from the collision but still flying. Because Ork aircraft were built for exactly this kind of madness. We were going down. The crash happened in slow motion and too fast all at once. The world became a tumbling chaos of metal and bodies and noise, impacts that rattled my teeth and slammed me against walls and ceiling and floor. The lockbox flew from Monroe's grip, struck a support strut, burst open. Its contents scattered across the compartment. Golden coins, actual physical currency. He had sold out millions of people for gold. Then we hit the ground and everything went black. I woke to silence and pain. The transport had come down in a courtyard, its hull cracked open like an egg, debris scattered across a wide radius. I was lying half outside the wreckage, one leg pinned under a section of hull plating, my head throbbing with what was probably a concussion. Emergency lights flickered weakly, smoke curled from a dozen small fires, bodies everywhere. The stormtroopers had not survived, neither had the pilots. The 2 officers were crumpled together near the forward section, one obviously dead, the other making small sounds that would not last long. And Monroe. The prefect was alive. He had landed near the rear of the compartment, protected from the worst of the impact by a storage crate that had wedged itself against the bulkhead. He was on his hands and knees, blood running from a cut on his scalp, gathering his scattered coins with frantic, trembling hands. "My payment," he was muttering. "My payment, I earned it. I pulled myself free of the debris." The leg screamed with pain but held my weight. Broken ribs, definitely, maybe internal bleeding, hard to tell. I found my rifle somehow, its barrel bent but the power pack still connected. Not accurate anymore, not reliable, but functional. Monroe looked up as I approached, his eyes widened. "Now wait," he said. "Wait, let us discuss this. I can help you. I have connections. I can get you off this world. I can— How many?" My voice did not sound like mine. Too flat, too empty. "How many people died because of you? It is not that simple." He was backing away, hands raised, coins spilling from his fingers. "You do not understand the pressures I faced, the political realities. The Orks were going to come eventually. I simply ensured that when they did, certain assets would be protected. Certain people would be— How many?" He did not answer. He lunged instead, grabbing for my rifle, some last desperate bid for survival. I sidestepped. The concussion made the world spin, but I had been trained for this, drilled until the movements were automatic. I brought the rifle around and hit him across the face with the bent barrel. Monroe went down hard, blood and teeth on the pavement. He tried to crawl away, and I hit him again. 40,000, I said, in the cathedral alone. 40,000 people gathered for the celebration, families, children. They were singing when the first shell hit. I could hear them through my vox, singing about the new year, about hope, about the Emperor's blessing. I hit him again. My sergeant's name was Marcus Hutchins. He had a daughter on Calix the 4th. He showed me her picture every day. She was 7 years old. Again. The woman in the tunnel was reading your manifest when she died. She knew. At the end, she knew who had killed her. Monroe was making sounds, wet, desperate sounds. I stood over him, watching him bleed, and felt nothing at all. The ground began to shake. I looked up, through the smoke and flames, through the collapsed buildings and the screaming night. I saw the Warboss coming. His massive form moved through the destruction with the casual ease of a god among insects, his power claws sweeping aside anything in his path. He had seen the crash. He was coming to investigate. Monroe saw him too. What was left of Monroe's face contorted with terror. "Help me," he gasped through broken teeth. "Throne, help me, he will kill us both." "No," I said. "He will kill you. Eventually. After he has had his fun." I started walking. "Wait." Monroe tried to crawl after me, leaving a trail of blood on the pavement. "You cannot leave me. You are a soldier. You have a duty to—" I kept walking. Behind me, the Warboss's laughter rolled across the ruins like thunder. I heard Monroe's scream begin, heard it rise to a pitch that should not have been possible from a human throat, heard it continue far longer than seemed right. I did not look back. The city burned around me as I walked. Cascadia Prime was dying, and there was nothing anyone could do to stop it. The Orks would strip it clean, take everything of value, enslave or kill whoever remained. Standard greenskin protocol. In a year, maybe less, there would be nothing left but ruins and bones. But I was not thinking about that. I was thinking about the data slate in my pocket, the one I had taken from the dead scribe. Monroe's manifest, the evidence of his betrayal. Somewhere in this galaxy there were people who needed to see it. Inquisitors, commissars, anyone with the authority to ensure that what had happened here was documented, remembered, avenged. I had a mission now, something beyond survival. The edge of the city lay ahead, marked by the boundary wall that separated the capital from the agricultural zones beyond. The wall had been breached in a dozen places, but not everywhere. Not yet. If I could get through, get into the open country, find somewhere to hide until the Orks moved on. An Ork stepped out of the smoke ahead of me. The same one. I recognized him immediately. That red augmetic eye, that massive industrial blade still stained with Sergeant Hutchins's blood. He had found me again. Or maybe he had been following me all along, savoring the chase, waiting for the right moment to close the distance. "There you, Isis." His grin stretched impossibly wide. "I've been looking for you, little Humie. You run good. Real good. But the chase I's over now, yeah?" I raised my rifle. The bent barrel made aiming impossible, but at this range it did not matter. I fired. The shot hit him in the chest, dead center. His armor absorbed most of it, but this close, even a damaged las rifle could do some work. The Ork staggered, looked down at the smoking hole in his armor, then looked back at me with an expression of pure delight. "You got some fight in ya." He started forward. "That's good. That's real good. Makes IT better." I fired again, each shot slowing him fractionally, each impact earning me another half-second of life. The power pack was draining fast. 3 more shots. 2, 1, click. The Ork was on me before I could react. His massive hand closed around my throat, lifting me off my feet like I weighed nothing. His face was inches from mine, that fang-filled grin close enough that I could smell his breath, rank and meaty, and absolutely unconcerned with the concept of hygiene. "Fun's over, Humie." His augmetic eye clicked and whirred, focusing on my face. "But don't worry, you gave a good chase. I'll remember you. I had one chance. One stupid, desperate, almost certainly futile chance." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a crack grenade. Standard issue. Every soldier carried one. I had forgotten about it until this moment, forgotten that it was even there, nestled against the data slate that held Monroe's betrayal. My fingers found the activation stud. 3-second fuse. The Ork saw what I was doing. His grin faltered. Don't you? I jammed the grenade into the smoking hole in his chest armor and twisted. The explosion threw us both backward. Pain, incredible and absolute, ripping through my body as shrapnel tore into flesh. The world became heat and noise, and the strange sensation of flying through air that I had no control over. I hit the ground, hard. Darkness swam at the edges of my vision. I could not feel my left arm. I could not feel much of anything below the waist. Blood was pooling beneath me, warm and sticky, spreading faster than seemed right. But I was alive. The Ork was not. His body lay a few meters away, chest cavity torn open, that augmetic eye still clicking and whirring even though the brain it was connected to had clearly stopped working. His grin had become a rictus. In death, he almost looked surprised. I tried to stand. My legs refused to cooperate. Something was very wrong down there. I did not want to look. Instead, I focused on the wall ahead, on the gap I could see through the smoke, on the distant green of the agricultural zones beyond. So close, so impossibly close. I started crawling. Every movement was agony. Every inch of progress felt like it might be my last. Blood trailed behind me, painting a red path across the pavement, marking my slow, stubborn journey toward a freedom I was not sure I would live to reach. The night was ending. Through the smoke and the flames, I could see the first grey light of dawn creeping across the sky. The new year was here. The celebration I had been standing guard over was less than 12 hours in the past, though it felt like a lifetime ago. The Orks were still rampaging through the city, their Waaagh still echoing off the burning buildings, their Warboss still crushing whatever resistance remained. But they were not looking this way. They were focused on the heart of the city, on the rich pickings, on the fun still to be had. A dying soldier crawling toward the edge of their attention was not worth noticing. I reached the wall. The gap was narrow, barely wide enough to squeeze through. My damaged body protested every contortion, every scrape against rough stone. Blood loss was making me dizzy, making everything soft around the edges. But I kept moving, kept crawling, kept refusing to stop. And then I was through. The agricultural zone stretched out before me, endless fields of grain that had been growing for the harvest celebration, now trampled and burning in patches but still mostly intact. In the distance I could see a farmstead, its lights dark, probably abandoned when the attack began. Shelter, maybe supplies, maybe a vox I could use to call for rescue. Maybe. I crawled toward it. The sun rose over Cascadia Prime, painting the sky in shades of orange and red that perfectly matched the fires still burning in the capital. From somewhere behind me, I could hear the Warboss roaring orders, organizing his forces for the next phase of conquest. The Waaagh would spread across the continent. It would devour everything. Nothing could stop it. But I had stopped one traitor. I had killed one Ork. I had survived one night that should have killed me a dozen times over. The data slate was still in my pocket. Monroe's manifest, the evidence of his betrayal. Someone would see it. Someone would know. The farmstead grew closer with every agonizing inch of progress. I could see it more clearly now. A collection of buildings clustered around a central courtyard. Smoke rose from one of the chimneys. Someone was still there. Someone who could help. I opened my mouth to call out. The world went grey. When I woke again, I was inside. A low ceiling above me, rough wooden beams, the smell of stored grain and something antiseptic. My body had been bandaged. My left arm was still there, though it did not move when I tried. My legs, I could feel them again, which was good. The pain that came with that feeling was less good. A face swam into view above me, human, female, old, deeply lined, with eyes that had seen too much and expected nothing good. She was holding a bowl of something that steamed. "Drink," she said. Her voice was flat, practical. "You lost a lot of blood. Need fluids." I tried to speak. My throat was raw, my lips cracked. She helped me sit up slightly, held the bowl to my mouth. Warm broth. It tasted like nothing I could identify, but it was liquid, and it was not poison, and that was enough. "The Orks," I managed, "still in the city, have not come this way yet. Will, eventually." She shrugged with the fatalism of someone who had already accepted their fate. "Got maybe a day, maybe two. Then they will burn the fields for fun. I fumbled at my pockets, panic rising until my fingers found the data slate. I need to get this off-world. Evidence. Traitor. Someone has to know. The old woman looked at the data slate, then at me. Something shifted in her expression. Not hope, too practical for that, but maybe something adjacent. My grandson had a ship, she said. Small thing. Cargo hauler. He was in the city when... She did not finish the sentence. She did not need to. The ship, I said. Is it here? In the barn, hidden under tarps. He was supposed to leave yesterday, but he went to the celebration first. Wanted to see the fireworks. The fireworks. I remembered them. Gold and crimson against the night sky, so beautiful that I had mistaken the first Ork shell for part of the show. Can you fly it? Me? She almost laughed. I am a farmer. Spent my whole life in dirt. Never been higher than the top of a grain silo. Then I will fly it. You cannot even stand. I will fly it, I repeated. Help me up. She stared at me for a long moment. Then slowly she set down the bowl and reached for my arm. Getting to the barn took forever. Every step sent waves of agony through my battered body, and without the old woman's support I would have collapsed a dozen times. But we made it. The ship was there, just as she had said, a battered cargo hauler that looked like it might fall apart in a stiff breeze. The cockpit was cramped, designed for a pilot half my size. I squeezed into the seat, studied the controls, tried to remember my basic flight training from what felt like 1,000 years ago. The systems were primitive but functional. The fuel cells were charged. The nav cogitator was already programmed with a course to the nearest Imperial way station. I could do this. Come with me, I said to the old woman. There is nothing left here. Come with me. She shook her head. My husband is buried under the oak tree by the eastern field. My children grew up in that farmhouse. My whole life is in this soil. She stepped back from the ship. Someone should stay to remember what this place was. I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell her that staying was death, that memories meant nothing if no one survived to keep them, that her sacrifice was pointless in a universe that did not care about pointless sacrifices. But I saw the look in her eyes, the same look I had seen in Sergeant Hutchins, in the scribe in the tunnel, in all the people who had chosen to stand and die rather than run and live. Faith, maybe, or stubbornness, or just exhaustion so deep that death seemed easier than starting over. I will tell someone, I said. About this place. About you. I will make sure people know. She smiled. It was a small expression, barely there, but genuine. Fly safe, soldier. I closed the cockpit, initiated the launch sequence. The cargo hauler shuddered and groaned, protesting the sudden demand after who knew how long sitting idle. But it rose. Slowly, shakily, it rose. Through the viewport I watched the farmstead shrink below me, watched the old woman standing in the yard watching me go, watched the smoke columns from the burning city, the Ork ships hovering over the destruction, the green tide still spreading across the continent. Cascadia Prime was lost. Millions of people were dead or dying. A traitor had sold them out for gold, and now he was dead too, torn apart by the monsters he had invited in. But I was alive. I had the evidence, and somewhere out there someone was going to pay for what had happened here. The cargo hauler broke atmosphere. The stars emerged around me, cold and distant and utterly indifferent to the suffering below. I set the nav cogitator and engaged the warp drive. Behind me, Cascadia Prime burned. The new year had begun.